Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villere's Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villere's provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villere's Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Dave Miette Insurance Agency, 504-556-0809 or davemietteINSagency.com.
For over 48 years, Southern Tires and Auto Repair has provided services across the New Orleans metro area. Southern Tires offers a range of tires for all vehicles and ATVs. We also have a full suite of auto repair options, including brake repair, rim repair, custom exhaust, steering and suspension, and so much more. Southern Tires and Auto Repair, 2550 Hickory Avenue in Metairie.
Cnc Drugs is a family-owned pharmacy that's been serving Southeast Louisiana for over 50 years. Whether you need help taking care of an elderly family member, a growing child, or even a pet, Cnc provides patient-centered care for your entire family. Cnc Drugs, large enough to serve you, small enough to know you. Locations in Mandeville and Araby.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports, live from our state-of-the-art Pontchartrain production studios. I'm your host, Eric Asher, and today we talk a lot about the home teams, the New Orleans Saints, the Tulane Green Wave, the LSU Tigers, and now also we'll touch on the Pelicans coaching search as well. To break it down for us tonight, right here from WLAE-TV Sports Director Doug Mouton. Doug, welcome back to the show. Good to have you.
Always fun to do this show.
And I love the fact that we got this great backdrop behind us, great day, and looks like we're going to once again be saved from another hurricane, right?
It sure looks that way. It's just this. If you're not worn out by this hurricane season, there is something special about you. I am so over hurricanes at this, just everything.
Right.
It's killing me.
2020's been obviously a crazy year, but I mean for you because you got a background in news and sports, so a lot of times you're doing hurricane coverage. Yeah. And I didn't realize it until yesterday. I was talking on the radio show yesterday, and I'm saying, man, there was this 4 or 5, and then I actually looked at the NOAA.com. 6 storms we have had to deal with. So 6 times you've been out there doing some type of hurricane coverage.
Yeah, and Adam Ney, who's our sports photographer, Adam and I get drafted into hurricane coverage every time. We're both locals. We both know the area. We both know a lot of people. Yes. That's a great advantage. Now, look, right now we're lucky. Adam and I are lucky because at Channel 4 we have a strong group of reporters right now, which is great. Look, there was a while a few years ago when I was the lead guy in a hurricane, and I would tell the bosses, I'm not sure you want your sports guy as the lead guy in a hurricane. And they would say, yeah, we get it, but get to Burris. And it was like, all right. Yeah. So now, luckily, I'm sort of the back end guy. Like I'm number 7 if we have 7 crews out, and I'm good with that. I don't mind doing it because certainly I care about the area, and I've done it enough times where I sort of know what.
You do a great job.
Well, thanks. What's problematic and what's not. So we are drafted into hurricane coverage for now. Tomorrow, I feel horrible for the people in Lake Charles. Yes. We lived in Lake Charles. It was a TV job of mine.
That's right.
I feel terrible for them, but at the same time, when these things are out there, I just wish them off of us.
Oh, yes,
I always feel like my line is, look, we had Katrina.
Right.
For the rest of my lifetime, it's somebody else's turn.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Especially, look, we're still not all the way back. When you look at the infrastructure right now, we just can't handle it.
No.
And that's just the way it goes. But you guys are doing a great job over at 4. Continue again with 4th Down on 4, your Friday football show. Tell us everybody about it.
Well, the Friday football show, actually, for this 1 week only, because every game got moved off of Friday. 4th Down Friday is canceled this week. Look, the one thing I am kind of proud of this with 4th Down on 4, we didn't miss a show in the COVID. Now, I will say some of our shows in March and April may not have been the most invigorating shows of all time, but we still had Saints to talk about. We still had Pelicans to talk about. We found things to talk about. We felt like, even in the midst when COVID was the worst, we wanted to try to give people a half hour, just a diversion.
Exactly.
You know what? Just try not to think about how terrible things are for 30 minutes, and let's talk about some football. So honestly, I've tried in all those shows to keep them as COVID-free as possible. We did a LSU preseason special a couple weeks ago, and we talked about it before, and I said, you know what, let's not do any stories about the COVID issues LSU's had to deal with. Let's just give people a half hour. Let's give people a half hour COVID-free.
Yes.
And we've tried to do that on to a certain extent of sports, not to ignore it, and I'm not saying we're not taking it seriously, but I do think at some point there's a value to sort of putting that in a compartment and just trying to get away from it for a little. Dealing with it 23 hours a day is enough.
Yes. No, I agree. One of the reasons why this show continued as well.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, just people needed a respite. They needed to get away from it for just a little while.
A couple hours a day. I've watched more baseball since baseball restarted and look, I love Major League Baseball. It's sort of my guilty pleasure. I watch. But this year, I mean, I was off on Wednesday. I think I watched 8 hours of baseball playoff games.
Wow.
And it was spectacular. It was one of my favorite days of the year.
Did you do Korean baseball?
I did not do much Korean baseball. The problem is the times just, I'm never up early enough in the morning.
Are you kidding? Well, you're like me. You don't get off till late, so you're up late.
The times never worked for me for Korean baseball.
Neither did I. Well, let's start off with the Saints, 2-2, big win over the Lions, a necessary win, 35-29. Yeah. And I mentioned this on the radio show when I came in on Monday. You know, sometimes it takes an avalanche of adversity and maybe that inferior team to kind of get a team back on track. And it almost felt like what happened on Sunday kind of got this team back on track. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I hope so. And I think you might be right. And the first thing that it struck me as, it felt like, I don't know if you remember the London game against Miami, which I want to say was week 4 as well. And it sort of helped this team sort of jumpstart and find itself. I do think the Saints found some things. Now, look, I still think they have some fundamental issues that need to get better. Right. But I do think they found a lot of positives in Detroit, overcoming adversity and coming together. The Saints did it last year in Seattle. The last year in Seattle was literally one of the most remarkable things I've ever seen in sports. Remember, they go to L.A., Drew Brees gets hurt, they lose badly to the Rams, lose on both sides, dominated on both sides of the ball, and they lose their Hall of Fame quarterback. And when it was at its low, at the practices in Seattle, Sean Payton had like a jump in his step. Like he almost knew something. And then sure enough, they come out against the Seahawks and win, catch fire, go on a roll. And I'm hoping that this adversity will turn into that. Obviously, we won't know for another month. Let's see how they catch fire. But they did a lot of things well, and there are a lot of things that started trending the right way as opposed to the wrong way.
I would agree, especially again when you're missing 6 starters. You know, Thomas Cook and Pete on offense, Lattimore, Jenkins and Davenport on defense, and then during the game you lose Ramczyk, you lose Harris. I mean, so again, a lot of adversity they had to overcome, and then of course, look. This is uncharted territory when you talk about COVID-19. You get the false positive with Michael Burton. You're worried about maybe losing Alvin Kamara and other players. Look, I said that morning, and I was up late that morning. I was up about 2 a.m. when all this stuff was going down. And I posted on social media, look, this might be one of those deals where you're happy if they postpone the game.
Yeah. You could say that. Now, I'm not sure I would agree with that because I also thought, because I've also seen Sean Payton, when his back is most against the wall, that's when – and Seattle last year, so I thought, you know what, this team might have something special in them if they can play. And actually, it was about 1 a.m., and I was texting with a couple of friends of mine, and somebody said the only way they play the game is if it's a false positive. And I remember thinking, yeah, that's probably true. And sure enough, it turns out the 4th false positive, the weirdness of the testing, I do not claim to understand any of that, but that seems like the money the NFL is spending, there shouldn't be so many false positives, but I guess that's the world we live in.
It is.
The Saints got to play, and and you said it, losing Ramczyk, and when you watch the game again, Nick Easton had a really good game, but Tyron Armstead, to me, is one of the most underrated players, maybe in Saints history, because he hadn't been able to stay healthy. He has a dancer's feet in a 300-pound body and is so much fun to watch. He was dominant. And Cesar Ruiz played well. Eric McCoy is a stud. I mean, look, they played really well up front.
They did.
They ran the ball 42 times. It was fun. Look, I grew up in the 70s. So to me, if you could just beat somebody up in football, I find that fun to watch. And the Saints beat up Detroit up front, and it was the offensive line. They got great blocking on the edges. Josh Hill's a monster blocking. Traquan Smith was great blocking in the run game. Ran the ball 42 times and earned a win.
To me, I think that is the key to the win, but I think it's also going to be the key to the season. First of all, they will hold the ball over 36 minutes, okay? You mentioned 42 times running the football. It helped the offensive line because they were able to be physical, right? Yeah. It keeps the defense off the field, which, again, they've been having issues. And then, of course, look, it's untapped potential on what they're doing in terms of Latavius Murray.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like you go back to last year and you look at games in which they would have run him more. I think they could have won those games, especially down the stretch. And I'd love to see more of a 1-2 punch with Murray and Kamara, and then, not putting so much pressure on Brees to win every play.
And I do think this was maybe the best example yet of that 1-2 punch. Latavius Murray's a hammer.
Yes.
And what it also does, first of all, he's going to beat people up. And I love the idea of beating people up.
Sure.
You already had an offensive line that was dominating, and then you have a running back who's going to hit DBs and people on the second tier and going to hurt them.
Right.
And then what you're also doing is taking those hits off of Alvin Kamara, which I think you need.
True. Clearly,
you're going to need Kamara in a big way, and if you need him in the fourth quarter, you want to be able to get him the ball 8 or 10 times in the fourth quarter if you have to, and Murray taking those hits help. What to me, the biggest difference in this game, what the Saints were able to do was hit on a bunch of intermediate passes. They were able to hit 10, 15 yards downfield and able to get enough of a cushion. The passes that were going 3 yards downfield were now going 12 yards downfield.
Yes.
It loosened things up just enough to open up that running game, and it was highly complimentary. They never did take shots. I know that air yards are a thing, and they were up. There still weren't deep shots, which I still think you're going to need that part of the game at some point. But there were enough intermediate shots to loosen them up, to run the ball. And it was a nice complementary offense, and that's how you control the clock. They played to their strengths in a way that I really liked, and the strength is that offensive line and Kamara and Murray.
Yes.
They played. And I tell you, the one thing that was so much fun to watch was Emmanuel Sanders' work, because so many of his 12, 15-yard catches were him in a pattern, finding a hole in coverage and just sitting down. Right. It's the one thing from years of playing flag football that you try to tell people, if you're between two defenders and they're in the zone, just stop.
Right.
Just sit down right there and wait for the ball.
Right.
And Emmanuel Sanders, being the 30-year-old veteran, did such a spectacular job of just sitting in holes over and over. And you would see a couple of times Drew Brees even purposely throwing behind him a little bit so he would sit in that hole. And it was the first time they were in sync.
Right.
And his ability to find space in the coverages and not use his speed and blow through it, but to actually use his smarts and sit in those holes. I mean, I found it beautiful to watch offensively.
Another guy is Traquan Smith. Again, his 4 catches were crucial.
All
in this
4.
win. All 4. And then the fumble recovery.
And then the fumble recovery was one of the biggest plays of the game. And if you watch Traquan Smith in the run game, sealing on the out.
Exactly.
Traquan Smith is a tight end.
There is no doubt.
Way he blocks. People sometimes, I'll get people ask, how is Josh Hill playing? Look, he's not a real natural pass catcher. He's never going to be great in that part of it. Josh Hill is an offensive tackle that can run and play in space, block in space. Traquan Smith did that. Emmanuel Sanders set a few nice, smart blocks. And Traquan Smith and Josh Hill blocking in the run game are a big part because a lot of those were on the edges with Kamara.
What did Peyton say last year? Hill opens the door for almost every one of their plays?
Almost every one of their plays. Yeah, Hill is an underrated guy. I know you watch him in the pass game and you can see he's not supernatural at that part of the game. But in the run game, huge value. You used it. I do think it's something you can use a lot more going forward. Look, 2 games this season, they've run the ball more than they've passed the ball. Those are your 2 wins.
That's right. Yeah. They ran 34 times against Tampa, 42 times against the Lions, and they won. And I think it's a recipe for success throughout the rest of the season because it also makes – I also feel that Breeze felt a little uncomfortable early in the pocket, but he seems to be back feeling that comfort level, stepping up, going through his progressions. He doesn't seem to be hurried as much.
No, it's one game.
Right.
It's hard to make long-term, this is better based on one game. Because I tell you, going back to the Green Bay game, the one series of plays that, to me, is still the defining series of the first quarter of the season. Taysom Hill, okay, first of all, the Saints get a fourth down stop. Get the ball back, tie game, chance to win. At this point, there's about 9 minutes left. Taysom Hill fumbles. So Detroit gets it back. Green Bay gets it back. Saints defense got off the field, forced a field goal.
Yes.
So the Saints get the ball at their own 25, and that's the series. There's, I want to say, 8:20 or so to go in the game. 7-8 minutes to go in the game. Got the ball at your own 25, a chance to go, obviously, at least a field goal to tie it, chance to get a touchdown, go up, and win this game. First down, they throw to Alvin Kamara 3 yards downfield. He's tackled. Second down, Breeze looks, checks down to Deontay Harris 1 yard downfield. They gain 2. Third down, they run a little screen to Kamara in the flat 4 yards behind the line. So with the game on the line, they threw 3 passes, 3 yards downfield, 1 yard downfield, 4 yards behind the line. 3 and out, punt. Green Bay gets it back. Remember, long drive. They get the touchdown that seals the game. To me, that was an example. Drew Brees stopped throwing interceptions in 17.
No doubt.
And a lot of that is he just became more risk averse, just didn't take chances. Teddy Bridgewater used to say last year all the time, I try to follow Drew, and he says no such thing as a bad completion. Check down, nothing wrong with taking the check downs. And it can be a recipe for success. But in this case, you had a chance to go beat a Super Bowl contender, and you were so afraid of making a mistake that you never really tried to make a play. And I understand risk averse, and maybe for the first 3 quarters, risk averse is the way to go. But when you get to that fourth quarter, you got a chance to win a game. Sometimes you're going to have to throw a pass.
Well, I agree.
And sometimes you're going to have to throw into coverage and try to hit a tight window. And I know without Mike Thomas, that's harder to be okay with doing that. But in that game, they had a chance to beat a great team and didn't beat them, not because they tried to beat them and were ineffective, but because they were afraid to be aggressive at that moment.
When you're looking at the all 22 on that game, are you seeing receivers that are getting separation?
Not as much. But look, sometimes you're going to have to find tight windows. And I totally get what you're saying. Sometimes you're going to have to try to hit a tight window. Sometimes you're going to have to throw a 50-50 ball and hope your guy's better. What I'm saying is for the first 3 quarters, I'm okay with not taking that chance. But in that particular situation, if you don't score on that drive, Aaron Rodgers is on the other side with a 3-point lead, your chances of winning, and I don't know what the computer would tell you, to me your chances of winning are 0. If you don't, this is your chance to go win. And to me, they have to use that singular 3-play drive as their motivation going forward. Yes, I understand being risk averse and turnover management, but at some point you got to play to win.
Another big thing about this past weekend was, again, 4 penalties. 67 yards. This has been a team on both sides of the ball that has been heavily penalized, and that was a big part of this team winning.
Yeah. Oh, no question. Yeah. 67 yards in penalties, which was their best 2 weeks ago. I do the 4 takeaways on the Monday after the game.
Which I love, by the way.
2 weeks ago, I went back 15 years and looked up penalty yardage, and the most penalized team was a Raiders team. I want to say it was 2010. They averaged 85 yards a game. And then the most penalized teams over 15 years were like 85, 82, 79, 78. The Saints were at 110 yards a game. They're blowing away the most penalized teams. And I didn't go back. It might be in NFL history. I don't know. I only went back 15 years. And obviously 60. And I did it. I want to do those numbers while they're high because I know they're going to come down.
Sure they are.
It's because it's so, just to illustrate how crazy the number of penalties and the yardage on those penalties. And some of them are so stupid. And I know people want to get on officiating, but the PI on Marcus Williams this week, when it's an overthrown ball and he's not far off of it, he just runs through the guy. They're going to call that in everywhere from junior high to the NFL. That's a flag, and it's the correct flag, and it was needless. So many of these, the one on Janoris Jenkins in the end zone 2 weeks ago. It's like just try to make a play, and I mean, when you make it that obvious, you're going to get a call 100% of the time.
And not just that, you're going to get a reputation, which I think they have right now.
No question.
Okay, and then officials are looking for it.
No question. You've done it back. And I know Anzalone's were both of the ones on Anzalone could have gone either way, and I think those could have been reputation calls too. Right. And see, look, sometimes you're going to have a call go against you. Sometimes 2 or 3 times in a game, you're going to have it's football. There's a lot of ticky-tack stuff that could be called that's not called.
It depends on the crew.
Correct. And you know this. There are penalties that are, illegal motion, that's a penalty, there's no doubt. But there's so many things with holding and pass interference that 10 different referees, maybe 7 of them call it interference. And so you're going to get some of those calls. And you have to accept the fact that not every call is going to be right by your head. You're going to get, so what you have to not do is give them the obvious ones too. Because you're going to get a couple that you're not going to be happy with. Don't give them the stupid ones too, because then all of a sudden you go from 3 to 8.
Right. And again, if it's a PI call, those are chunk yards that you're giving up.
Those aren't 5 yards.
Penalties, right?
Correct.
Okay, those flip the field.
Those are 33-yard penalties that you can't afford ever.
No doubt. The thing that surprised me the most about the defense was the play of Patrick Robinson and P.J. Williams, especially Patrick Robinson, who looked like he did when he was in an Eagles uniform. I'm going to tell you right now, I did not have a lot of faith going into this game with those 2 guys on the outside. I even talked about it on social media during the show that week. If that's the case, they're cooked. They're done. Stafford's going to eat them alive. And he didn't. The defense had 3 sacks, 7 quarterback hits, 5 tackles for losses, 3 pass defense, and then they held the Lions to 90 yards rushing. So from a defensive effort, it was probably one of the better efforts we've seen this season.
Oh, no question about it. And actually, I thought 2 of those sacks were coverage sacks. I thought on the back end they were terrific. I thought DJ Swearinger played a terrific game too, and he was in there a lot. Patrick Robinson and P.J. Williams were both terrific all training camp. They both had good camps. I think P.J. Williams is underrated and is a better player than I think some Saints fans give him credit for being. Patrick Robinson was obviously a surprise. Patrick Robinson had played 1 defensive snap in the 2 games previous to this one, and that will tell you what the Saints staff thinks. Right. You may think this guy's fine, but he is their 8th defensive back. And you're starting your number 8 at any level, that's not generally a great recipe, and he was terrific.
And both guys are not outside corners.
And they're both not natural outside corners.
They're nickel dime guys. You even see P.J. Williams now more of a safety type.
P.J. Williams might be more of a natural safety, and Patrick Robinson definitely more of a slot guy, and they were both excellent.
And then you bring in Crawley off the scrap heap, okay?
Correct. And look, Galladay's a good receiver.
Oh, absolutely.
He's a really good receiver. Nobody's going to shut him out. Right? So he's going to get his. So the fact that the Lions got some, well, you know what? This is the NFL. And the other guys are getting paid to play too, and he's legit. So, look, I thought they definitely the story of the game. I do think the pass rush is a problem right now that's going to have to get better.
Is that going to get better with a Marcus Davenport coming back?
If he ever gets on the field. Right. Yes. Yeah, look, Davenport's a freak, right? I'm talking about an athletic freak. A guy his size, his quickness, his speed. The one thing you saw out of him last year was he'd dominate when he was tuned in, and then he would disappear a while, which is just a guy who hadn't quite figured it out yet. And you're hoping to get more, as he gets older, more of the dominating and less of the disappearing. Absolutely. But you got to get on the field. And the fact that he's not on the field yet, we heard initially that he maybe he'd play the opener. No, he'll definitely play week 2. No, he's not going to make week 2. He'll definitely be ready week 3. No, he's not going to be ready week 3. Hopefully. We can just keep hearing that.
Well, he's not on IR, and he only got a 3-week IR now.
Correct. You only have a 3. So that tells you they thought for sure they were going to get him back in that first 3, and they didn't. Can't get on the field. Added an extra injury. Yes, the pass rush should be better with him on the field, but you got to get him on the field.
I would agree. One of the troubling things about this defense this season, and even into last season in big games, and you saw this against top tight ends, the inability to cover the tight end. And look, you can go back to Waller and say, okay, he had an all-world game, but it's not just Waller. It is consistently the inability to cover the tight end, and also crossing routes. They have a tremendous amount of issues with crossing routes.
Right, although they were better with it this week.
They were.
But yes, no, you're right. Look, so many back-end problems. I think Marcus Williams has had a rough start to this season. And I think he is a root of a bunch of that. Malcolm Jenkins got beat, but if you watch Darren Waller, if you like ISO on him for the whole game, the Saints literally tried everything to stop him. It wasn't just Malcolm Jenkins struggled early, but at one point it was Janoris Jenkins. At one point it was C.J. Gardner-Johnson. They tried everybody.
Davis did the best job on him.
And look, Demario Davis is so underrated in pass coverage. He's so good at it. But they literally tried everybody and couldn't figure it out. And honestly, I thought from a coaching standpoint, from a play calling standpoint, it's one of those John Gruden things, and it's old school football. It's almost wishbone football when you run the fullback and you say, until you stop the fullback, we're going to run it every play.
Exactly.
It's JT Curtis has made a career that way. Until you stop one thing, you're getting one thing. And that's what Waller was. And John Gruden, part of what makes him a great coach is that he recognized Saints just couldn't cover this guy. Whatever it was that day, they just couldn't cover that guy. And he targeted him 16 times. 16 times he targeted him. Yes. And Gruden said, I'm going to do this over and over and over. And if you figure it out, maybe I'll come up with something else. But until you figure it out, I'm not doing anything else. And to me, that's a smart coach. He's not going to overthink it. He's just going to bang that drum all day. And he did. And
plus a guy that knows Peyton pretty well.
And a guy who knows Peyton real well.
Okay, I mean, again, when he was in TV, the one thing he always did was go to the Saints film, break the Saints film down. So again, obviously, he's got an affinity for what Peyton's doing and has a lot has what he's doing as well.
And it goes both ways. And I thought Gruden did a great job of figuring out what was working and just banging that drum all day.
I definitely agree. Going forward now, will we see the defense that has been advertised?
I hope so, and I think so. And look, here's part of it. And every time I bring this up with anybody with the Saints, they get mad because they say, hey, it's a different year. It's a new year. But clearly, this version of the Saints team started in 2017, right? They started poorly, caught a stride right about now, right about Game 5, and then were terrific. They did that in 17. They did that in 18. They did that in 19. And we saw the beginning of that this year. There is something about this version of the Saints team that it seems like whether it's a coaching thing or a player thing, it takes them about 3 or 4 weeks to figure it out. And then when they do, they can catch a stride. I really do think they're poised to do it. I think the offensive line, and I believe this more now even than I did at the beginning of the season, if it's not the best in the NFL, there are very few I would trade it for. It's in the top 2 or 3, no doubt. You
That's
play
with
or
without Pete?
With or without Pete, obviously better with Pete. But Nick Easton is, if he's a step down, he's a half a step down at most.
There's a reason why they kept him around.
There's a reason why they kept him around, no doubt. I think Eric McCoy has taken a major step forward. I love Ruiz getting more playing time. Yeah, and he's so athletic. You get him on the out. I mean, you saw it on the screen, but that's who he is. And the 2 tackles are as good as they get. Now, Ramczyk, you don't get all pros at his age. And Tyron Armstead, the only reason he's not is his inability to stay on the field. He is a ballerina. He's a dancer playing football in that body. And the thing about Armstead is that he makes it look so easy because his feet are so good. So he'll be stonewalling guys, and it almost looks effortless. So I think he partially doesn't get the credit because it's not a great effort for him because his feet are so good. He's so in front of everything. And I think they played to that strength. I think the defensive line will get better when they get Davenport. I think the secondary can be better than it's been yet. They just haven't figured it out yet. Yeah, I still believe everything I thought about this team, that they're as talented as anybody in the NFC. And look, going back to the Green Bay game, Green Bay 13-3 last year, clearly on a roll right now. Green Bay is absolutely a Super Bowl contender. And the Saints, who haven't figured it out yet and did not play well and were maddeningly unaggressive, still had a chance to beat them in the fourth quarter. Once this Saints team hits their stride, they will absolutely be as good as anybody.
And of course, look, the other part of it is, and this is kind of an ancillary thing, not having, well, this goes for LSU and the Saints, not having fans in the stands affects those teams. You know, more than I would say most teams because of the rabid fan base, the intelligence of the fan base, and the effect that they have on the game.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt a full Superdome would have affected the Green Bay game.
There's no doubt.
In a major, there's no doubt. I mean, Aaron Rodgers got 2 jumps on hard counts. You can't even do a hard count when the Superdome's full. You can't. No one could hear you. It's all silent counts.
Plus, he's making adjustments, and everybody can hear the adjustments.
Right. There's no doubt. Now, everyone's playing the same, and I'm sure other teams lose stuff too. I hate to use that. Because you got to, I mean, look, you adjust or die right now.
Well, it's true.
But
it does help that defense.
But
no doubt.
It absolutely does make a difference. But the fact is, you're going to have to play without it, and you're going to have to learn how to manage around it.
There's no doubt.
But your point is 100% right, though.
Do you think there is now? Look, this is Sean Payton, okay? And do you think that there will be a commitment to the run going forward after what we've seen in Tampa, against Tampa, and against Detroit?
Yeah, you would think so. I mean, look, nobody studies.
Game plans change week to week.
Yeah, and game plans change week to week. It's gonna, it depends on how you get played. But yeah, you're gonna have to make people, and then obviously, I think if you can get that extra guy in the box and get him to play up, maybe then you start hitting your shots. Because you're going to start having to take them at some point. But yeah, I think you got to pound and play to your strength. And look, Sean Payton's been as good an offensive coach as the NFL has seen in the last 2 decades. So my guess is he saw what we all saw, and that this is something that can work for you because you do have a uniqueness of 2 special running backs. Now look, Kamara's special at another level.
Yes.
And he's the best. There's literally no running back in the NFL I would trade him for. And Latavius Murray's not that guy, but Latavius Murray gives you a special kind of hammer on the inside. And I love the fact that they went to it a lot. Seeing him get double-digit carries, I think, is a really good thing.
Saints, Chargers, Monday night. Your thoughts?
I like the Saints because I do believe what you said, that we have figured some things out. And that there will be a progress.
Right.
Game 5 has been great for the Saints the last 4 years. I mean, mathematically, you see a pattern happen 3 times in a row. By the 4th time, you're like, I think I've seen this before.
Yeah, exactly.
I've seen this movie. And this movie is, by game 5, this team's going to start really figuring it out and being good. I know the talent of this team, and I know they haven't played to it yet. And I've also watched the Chargers a couple of times just because of the way the TV has worked out. And I do love Justin Herbert long term, but I don't necessarily love him short term. He's still a rookie quarterback. You got a veteran secondary that can take some advantage of that. He's thrown some interceptions. I think, and I liked him at Oregon. He was 3rd on my Heisman ballot this past year. I thought he was a really good college quarterback, and I think he's going to be a really good NFL quarterback in a couple of years. And I think the Saints can absolutely take advantage of that. I think they can run the ball on his team. I certainly like the Saints' chances. I would like it more if the Superdome were full and loud, but I like the Saints' chances.
He's Doug Mouton, sports director at WLAE-TV here in New Orleans. I'm Eric Asher. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. We'll hear from our underwriters. We'll come back. We'll talk LSU, Tulane, and the Pelicans, all coming up here on Inside New Orleans Sports. Stick around.
Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Experiencing rough weather with a bad roof can be a nightmare. It doesn't have to be.
Suburban Roofing, because when it comes to roofing, there is a difference.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Today, we are joined by Sports Director at Channel 4 Television, Doug Mouton. Doug, LSU, 1-1 now, 41-7 winners over Vandy. First of all, you can't compare the athletes from Vanderbilt to Mississippi State, okay? Because the athletes are much better. I thought that against Mississippi State, and I'd love to get your take on this because you covered it very, very closely. I thought they were outcoached. I don't think they were not prepared for the air raid offense, and I didn't like the excuses either. We didn't have the film. You got to go back and look at air raid offense all the way back, to the origins of it and know what's going on. You may not know what players on Mississippi State are going to do, the individuals, but you know what's happening there. And I was really surprised by the lack of adjustments on the defensive side of the ball. And again, surprised that the coaches weren't really ready. Now, again, completely different atmosphere, completely different situation with Vandy. They kind of look like LSU against Vandy, but really surprising the way things kind of turned out against Mississippi State.
Yeah, I was too, and I will say this. Look, it wasn't just all the guys that left. You also had Kerry Vincent opt out, and then Derek Stingley not be able to play. He's in the hospital. So if you just had those two guys back and had a little veteran presence in the secondary besides Jacoby Stevens, I think it could have been a different game. Yeah, I agree with you completely because we heard there was all this mystery about Mississippi State's offense, and then what we actually saw was really what Mike Leach has always done. Yeah, I was expecting a lot more wrinkles than we saw. What we saw is kind of what we expected.
And then you come back to this past week, and they're playing against Arkansas, and they've been stymied.
Correct. Arkansas looked a whole lot more ready.
Come on.
Right. No, and I get that. Look, it's a million factors, and this LSU team, more than any in a long time, needed a game against Nichols and a game against Rice. It needed those games to ramp up.
Vandy was their tune-up game.
Yeah, Vandy was, but this was a season when LSU, like last year, if LSU had come out and opened up an SEC schedule, they were as good. Look what they did against Georgia Southern in that first quarter. And Georgia Southern had been a bowl-winning team the year before, and LSU made them look like a junior high team. Because that team was veteran and ready. This is a completely new team. They clearly had the lights in their eyes in a big way. Eli Ricks becomes your number one corner. Literally just turned 18.
Was in high school last year.
Was in high school last year, and a young high school. Just turned 18 years old. That is a hard assignment right off the bat. They're playing down. Todd Harris was hurt and playing. It was literally just a whole bunch of bad things all at once. Didn't adjust. Really did get out coached. And it was just bad from the start. And looked bad and felt bad and was the one they had to get out the way.
But this week against Vandy, you saw a vast improvement.
Well, and the biggest improvement, the one thing that I think is the biggest thing going forward was the improvement in Miles Brennan.
Take it from there.
And the one thing, if you watch him against Mississippi State, every time the rush would come on him, hesitant to trust his first read and go, he was perpetually trying to run around to the right. And look, in the SEC, Miles Brennan's not the athlete to outrun even defensive ends. These are SEC defensive ends. These are guys who are going to play in the NFL often that you're probably not going to be able to outrun. And you saw it was literally, I want to say it was either LSU's first drive or second drive, but it was the first quarter. They're backed up at their own end, and the rush is coming around the right side, and Brennan stepped up and hit Arik Gilbert for a little first down. It was a little 8 or 9 yard pass. Literally, I want to say it was like 10 minutes on the clock, because I remember looking at the clock going, okay, well, we see first major progress from Miles Brennan. And look, all you can do is get better. All you can do is learn from game one in game two.
I agree.
Anybody who thought, and Mike Detillier tells me that Ed Ogeron believed his team could compete for a national championship this year. Honestly, that was never my expectation for this team. And I think if that's your expectation for this team, you're a little unrealistic at the start. You don't lose all those guys.
19 or 22 starters, come on.
Yeah, and then the opt-outs too.
The opt-outs,
look, if you just had your opt-outs back, if you had Jamar Chase and Kerry Vincent and Tyler Shelton, you would have been, and Derek Stingley, you would have been a slightly different team. If you look at any position group on LSU's team, and right this minute, you're not as talented this year as last year. That team was good enough to win a national championship. This team, honestly, is probably, they could still be a very good team, and they could be a much better team in December than they are now. But this was a team that was gonna need some time, and this unique schedule didn't afford them that. But you are seeing progress, and look, Joe Burrow's first year was a year building towards the second year. And you saw that. You have already seen improvement in Miles Brennan. That's all you can see. And I tell you, the one thing about Brennan that you didn't realize until he got into an SEC game is he can flick it.
Oh, he can.
He can flick it off balance.
And he's accurate.
And he's accurate.
Right.
And he's got a gun.
Right.
His long balls, you see, he's underthrown a couple already. Not by a lot, but by a step. And I think it's just because he's not fully trusting himself yet. At some point, when the light fully goes on for him, and I wasn't sure about this 3 weeks ago, I think Miles Brennan can be a really good SEC quarterback, and I'm not sure I would have said that a month ago. But just based on what I've seen in 2 games, now he's got a long way to go, and he's not there. And Joe Burrow took a whole year to get there. As good as Joe Burrow turned out to be, his junior year, go back and look at those games, and he was okay. His numbers aren't great. He made mistakes. And Miles Brennan already made progress from week 1 to week 2. He can flick it. You know LSU's got weapons.
Yes.
The offensive line has to play better. You got to get a more consistent pass rush from somebody besides Ali Gay, who has been a revelation already. And I think this team's going to be good eventually. I think they'll be good enough to beat Missouri. Will they be good enough in the meat of the SEC schedule?
Well,
I don't know.
That starts with Florida.
That starts with Florida. But I will also say, when LSU went to Alabama last year, anybody who was positive LSU was going to blow away Alabama's lying to you. I thought this LSU team last year, they can play with Alabama. But the Alabama games, when I said, holy moly, this team can win a national championship. And that was 1/2 against Alabama. You saw that. So when I say I don't know if they can play with Florida, I could be proven wrong. They could come out by the Florida game and lights start clicking. Because, look, Eli Ricks is a 5-star athlete. You could see it. He's also 18 years old. And a 20-year-old Eli Ricks, no matter what, is going to be better than an 18-year-old. So let's see how they progress. But I thought it was a solid progression from week 1 to week 2.
And also you got a chance to see John Emery, who again is their most dynamic back.
No question.
Get an opportunity to play. Look, they got the physical back in Davis Price and Curry. You need that Alvin Kamara type of back, and he proved he is a tough run. He's tough.
No doubt.
He is a much more physical runner than I thought he was.
No doubt he can do that. But the one thing John Emery, what makes him special, he is a natural pass catcher. You watch him. I mean, look, it was one we were looking at it. It was a little swing pass out to him that Brennan threw kind of hard. He's just a natural pass catcher in a way that's going to make him a huge NFL talent. Because he's going to be able to play in anybody's pass game with receiver type abilities. And I think as LSU taps into that part of his game, I think he's going to be a great player at LSU.
They get Glenn Logan back this week. That's going to help the interior of the defensive line. You mentioned Ali Gay, how he's been playing. Anthony's played pretty well as well.
Yeah, no, Andre Anthony's a real.
I mean, he's played well.
And LSU's got a bunch of those guys.
They really do.
Like the guys who waited their turn. John Trey Kirkland was a great player as a quarterback at Lutcher. How many guys wait around for 4 years for that opportunity? Just doesn't happen in college football. Just doesn't happen. Kirkland's one of the leaders of the team. He's loved in that locker room, and you saw what he can do. He can be a special kind of unique weapon that can be used in jet sweeps and in bubble screens. John Trey can really play. He waited his turn and is now ready. Andre Anthony waited his turn. Miles Brennan waited his turn. These are guys that when the light goes on, they're mature college football players that just haven't done it yet. So those are the kind of guys that by the time you get to Florida, you're going to need them to take major steps forward by that game.
I would agree. And, of course, the secondary young, but as you mentioned, very talented, especially when you get Stingley on the field.
Especially when you go, Stingley clearly makes him better. Ricks is going to be a great player. Jacoby Stevens is a terrific player right now. Look, it would help if you had Kerry Vincent, if he hadn't opted out for sure. Todd Harris has been hurt. Once he's fully healthy. No, you've absolutely got players. They just need some time. And you saw it. Christian Fulton became a better player. I mean, there's a development in a kid, in all of us, between 18 years old and 21 years old. You're a different person, and it's that maturation that it's a smarts thing. And I do think they're going to get there. Will they get there fast enough for the Florida game? I think that's obviously the big question right now. And I'm not saying they won't, but I'm saying they might not.
Jabril Cox, we had 7 tackles, 6 solo. They said there was a lot of freelancing going on in the first game. They need to kind of hone him in on his assignments, but you could see the athleticism of him.
Yeah, Jabril Cox is sort of the new model of what a linebacker looks like. Long and lean.
Yes.
It's the Quan Alexander mode. If you can't run and play linebacker now, yeah, Jabril Cox is a great story. North Dakota State. Wins 4 national championships, or part of 3 national championships at North Dakota State. North Dakota State is as good as many Division I programs, but you see all kinds of guys go from the FCS to the NFL, and he's one of those guys with that ability. Graduates and wants to give it a shot in the SEC, which I love. Comes to LSU, playing here, and you know what? He's going to fit right in. Yeah, I do think he did have the pick 6 against Mississippi State, but also all of the back end was in disarray, and he was part of that against Mississippi State. I do think he's going to be a terrific player. One of those guys, again, who can be an Andre Anthony, who can be one of a veteran to help stabilize all these young guys, and they need him to be.
Strengths of this team, and then if you would follow with the weaknesses of this team, at what you've seen after 2 games.
Well, the strength is going to be Miles Brennan and going downfield and that crew of elite weapons, which will include John Emery in the passing game. I think their strength is going to be being able to air it out. We're seeing the weakness on defense. You've got to get a more consistent pass rush from anybody besides Ali Gay. The pass rush has got to be better because you have got a young secondary. You do not have, Christian Fulton's a second-round pick, and Stingley's a first-round pick, and Delpit's a second-round pick. You don't have a secondary ready for the NFL now. You got a secondary of kids. So you're going to have to rush the passer. You're going to have to rush the passer well, and you're going to have to get out of the every down man-to-man, which wasn't working against Mississippi State, getting beaten on crossing routes. You're going to have to play smarter on defense, which you saw against Vanderbilt. But Vanderbilt, let's be honest, is not the greatest test. Missouri will be a slightly better test. I don't think we're going to know until we get to Florida. There's going to be a lot of unknown going to Florida. They've got a couple more weeks to figure it out, but they got to figure it out. They got to give that back end more help than they did against Mississippi State.
Game is moved to Missouri because of Hurricane Delta. Again, it'll be an 11 a.m. kickoff instead of an 8 p.m. kickoff at Tiger Stadium. You know, a lot of times Ogeron gets these guys ready for those 11 a.m. kickoffs. Don't have that luxury this week. Talk a little bit about this move and how you think it either affects or doesn't affect the Tigers.
I think it doesn't. I think because this year everything has been it's almost like playing without fans. Everything has been so crazy, different, unusual that to have a game get moved and at a different situation. I think maybe in a year when you're more used to your structure, it would be more of a disruption. But this year, for every human on planet Earth, all of 2020 has been one perpetual disruption. So if you use as an excuse that you had a disruption, it's like nobody's buying that.
It's like what Peyton said after the Detroit game. Okay, they're not gonna don't cry for us.
Yeah, nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
No, nobody cares.
No,
right? No. We're all everyday life has been. I'm figuring out how to do TV at home. Nobody cares if I can't figure out how to make my Wi-Fi
on your
work.
Back porch.
Yes. Nobody cares if I have terrible Wi-Fi. Fix it.
Right.
Just adjust at this point. So I do not think that makes a difference. You weren't really going to have much of a home field advantage at home anyway. You can't make that much noise in that giant of a building with a quarter of the fans. So, yes, I think LSU will be ready. I think they've started figuring it out, and I'm really curious to see what they bring against Missouri.
Me too. Brett Martell said this on my radio show this week. If there was ever a year that, again, you're moving a game because of a hurricane and it's not going to make a difference, this is the year.
This is it.
Because you don't have fans in the stands because we've been through all this with COVID.
And nothing's normal anyway.
Right. So again, it's not a big game. And remember, this was one of those games they added to your schedule. Okay? When he's on the plate,
This game wasn't supposed to happen anyway.
Exactly.
That's a great point.
No doubt.
For sure.
Let's go to Tulane because, look, South Alabama, I don't know how much of a test it was. The Navy comes in. You think you got that in the bag by halftime, and then it's just one of the most embarrassing losses maybe in the history of the program. That's saying a lot.
Yeah, it was really embarrassing. It
really
was.
But you found something against USM when Pratt came in, the freshman Michael Pratt at quarterback. It's not a knock on Keon Howard. He just doesn't have the accuracy at the quarterback position. And today in college football, you have to be able to throw the ball accurately.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how well you run the ball.
It doesn't.
And I will say this, Willie Fritz designs a run game Willie Fritz knows how to run the football. He's got a terrific stable of running backs, even without Tyjae Spears, which you hate to see, kid from Ponchatoula, ACL. He's an NFL talent. He'll be back next year. Next year will be his redshirt sophomore year. So he's got time, and he's a terrific player.
But they're so deep, right?
They're so deep at running back. It's the best offensive line Willie Fritz has had, maybe the best offensive line Tulane's had in a decade or more. They can run the ball, but you're right. You have to be able, you can't play 9 in the box, no matter how well you run it. And what you saw to Michael Pratt were 2 pretty deep balls to Southern Miss, and it was almost message throws. You got them over the top, and 2 big plays, one to a back coming out the backfield, which was nice, and it's almost sending the message. If Pratt can throw the deep ball, he doesn't have to do a lot in this offense because Tulane's going to run the ball well, and I think you found something. We actually, first question I asked Willie Fritz after the Navy game, if you remember, they were playing in semi-hurricane conditions because that's all we have is hurricanes. And it wasn't, but look, the winds were kicking that day. And I was in the corner of the end zone. Winds were kicking. It was a light rain, so everything was wet. And the first thing I asked, and look, Keon Howard wasn't good in that game. I mean, he was terrible. And first question I asked was, did you consider making a quarterback change? He said, yeah, we did. But we thought, and look, Willie Fritz isn't just thinking about winning that game. He's got to think about long term. Is that the position you want to put a true freshman quarterback in when it's wet and crazy rain coming and crazy wind? Is that where you want to put your true freshman quarterback? It was a lot of adversity. He opted not to. They paid for it. But he didn't take long to pull the trigger in game 2.
That was set up, right? He was coming in on the
set up.
Third series.
Third series. Of course, it was supposed to go back to Howard. But at that point, it was done for good. Yeah, he had a quick hook the next time out. Pratt doesn't have to do a lot, did enough. You're going to run the ball well. I love what Willie Fritz has done. He's starting to get more quality local recruits. And I'll say this, I was talking about this with Frank Selfo at Southeastern. Locally, LSU wins a national championship last year, one of the great seasons in the history of college football. Tulane wins back-to-back bowl games for the first time in forever. Southeastern goes to the FCS tournament. Nichols goes to the FCS tournament. All 4 of those programs, Tulane less so than the other 3, largely built with local talent. There is that much local talent. It's not just the local talent. It's that our local high school coaching is so good that you're getting guys ready to play right away. And there's so much local talent that it's enough to support. And you can bring in what Billy Napier's done at ULL with a bunch of sort of local talent too. And has had a great start to this season, great year last year, bowl team. And there's so much good local talent. And you're starting to see Willie Fritz getting second-tier local guys. LSU's still going to get their pick of local guys. They're still going to get the Grant Delpits of the world. But Tulane can get that second-tier local guy. The Tyjae Spears is a great example.
They're not going to Memphis. They're not going to USM.
That's exactly right. Not going to Memphis. Maybe not going to Vanderbilt. Maybe not going to Florida or Florida State or West Virginia. Not even second-tier schools, but schools just one notch below LSU. LSU's going to get their guys, but LSU doesn't need it. They're going to take
Plus
8 or 10.
They're recruiting nationally as well.
Correct. LSU's going to take 8 or 10 or 15 at the most from Louisiana. That leaves 100 who can play. And Nichols and Southeastern, what they have done with those programs, with all local, incredibly talented teams. That Nichols and Southeastern didn't get there by some miracle. They got there with incredibly talented rosters that are all local. And you're seeing Willie Fritz tap more. I was talking to Willie about recruiting at one point. And one thing he said that I thought was interesting. When he first got here, he was getting some local recruits that would come to him, but they were sort of third-tier players. And he said, I don't want those kids. I don't want to take a kid because he's local if he can't help me win. And now he's starting to get the local kids that can really help him win. And again, Tyjae Spears to me is a classic example of a guy who can really play, coming from Hank Tierney, one of our most respected coaches over the last few decades. Coming from Hank Tierney to Tulane, immediately steps in as a freshman, ACL injury, but Willie Fritz likes being here, and if he can stay here long term, I think he can build Tulane into a consistent winner.
Defensively, that was what they're going to hang their hat on this year. Underachieved early, but again, looking like they're coming around.
The pass rush was so much better against Southern Miss, and Southern Miss is not a real good team, so it's not a great Curious to see what they do against Houston. That game is weird because Houston has had 5 games canceled for COVID reasons. 5!
Right. It's crazy.
They're 0-0 in what should be week 6 for them. They're 0-0, so nobody knows what we're going to get out of Houston. That was one of the fun games last year where Tulane did the little reverse and then hit the touchdown pass to McCluskey at the end. Curious to see what happens, but I love what Willie Fritz has built. They're fun to watch. He plays to his strengths. I think he's a terrific tactical coach. The Navy game would you might be able to make an argument otherwise, but you can't win when your quarterback can't complete a pass.
True, that's no doubt.
And I think he may have found something in Pratt. Let's see. Houston will be really interesting because it's a step up in class.
Well, and of course, look, film's the great equalizer there. Teams are going to look at what he does well, and they're going to try to take that away from him. He's going to have to overcome that. There's no doubt. But remember, he is a true freshman, so you have to be patient. Let's shift to the Pelicans because, man, I tell you what, you want to talk about keeping a secret.
Well, you're not kidding.
David Griffin has really kept a secret here. Let me look. There's been a lot of talk about who may not be. Doc Rivers was on the list. He ends up with Philly. They interviewed Ty Lue. Kenny Atkinson is a guy that has some ties with Trajan Langdon. What do you think they're looking for in a coach?
Well, I do think this team is so young, and I don't just mean young basketball wise. I mean young like human wise, like maturity wise. I do think they need a coach. And I do think that's why Alvin Gentry stayed on this team this year. They thought he could be a father and help this team not only get better playing basketball, but better just maturity-wise. This team's not going to be who it's going to be until these kids grow up a little bit. And I say kids, I don't mean that in any kind of a demeaning way. I mean, most of the Pelicans players are younger than my children.
Right.
And
mine.
Right. So these are really young men that have grown up to do. So I do expect a certain maturity in a coach that you're going to but you do have to have a guy who can teach them how to play better defense.
There's no doubt.
The one thing you don't want is for these guys to hit 25 and have no defensive system, no defensive skills to fall back on. You got to start teaching this team to play some defense right now. They were horrific on defense in the paint.
That's one of my keys.
In the bubble, and they got to get better at that. Look, I did find it interesting in the search that the first name we heard was Ty Lue. Then we heard 25 other names, and now we're hearing Ty Lue again.
Right.
So, and Ty Lue is a guy who's been around, and he's coached at the highest level, been to an NBA championship, and has coached NBA grown-ups and has a little maturity to him. Heard nothing but good things about him as a person. So he's a guy that definitely fits the profile of what I think they're looking for.
Well, let's hope that they're able to find that guy. I think Lou's probably more looking more at the Clipper job, but we'll see how that kind of plays out. But to your point, with only about 25 seconds left, I think they've got to get somebody that can teach defense. Defense has to be a cornerstone of the next coach.
Yeah, there's no question about that. That is clearly the weak point of this team.
No doubt. Doug, thanks for being with us. Certainly appreciate it. It's been a fun hour.
Yeah, it has been fun.
Yeah, no doubt. That's Doug Mouton, again, sports director over at Channel 4 Sports. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there's a rebroadcast of this program each and every Friday night right here on WLE at 10 p.m. You can catch us on the Deuce at 10 p.m. on Thursday nights, but also at 2 a.m. on Saturday if you're up late like Doug and I are. Also on Pelican Sports Television, 5 o'clock on Saturday, but also 9 o'clock on Friday. So a lot of ways to catch the show. Also, the WLAE-TV YouTube page. You catch us there and at ericasher.com. You catch me on the radio, also on 106.1 FM. That is 5 to 7 weekdays. You can listen live at ericasher.com. You can check it out on the TuneIn Radio app and also the iHeart Radio app as well. Special thanks to Doug Mouton for joining us on the program today, and also to the WLE production staff. What a great staff we have here. Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Tommy O'Connor, Tommy Fairley, and my director, William Hill. For Doug Mouton, I'm Eric Asher. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll check you out next week for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports.